The room had gone quiet. Lena set her glass down slowly and turned around. A Korean woman was standing in front of her. Beautiful in that precise, calculated way, sharp features, straight black hair. A dress that announced exactly how much it cost. Wine glass in hand. Smile still on her face. The smile of someone who had just said something cruel in a room full of people, and was waiting for the other person to absorb it quietly and look away. Lena did not look away. "I'm sorry, were you speaking to me?" "I was speaking about you." "There's a difference." "There isn't. Not from where I'm standing." One step closer. Not aggressive. Measured. The kind of step that announces a decision has already been made. "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you think you know about me or where I came from. But I will tell you this once and I won't say it again. Whatever you just said, don't say anything like it again. Not here. Not anywhere near me." The smile cracked at the edges. The woman turned across the room. To a man who had been standing there the entire time. Still, arms loose at his side, watching everything with an expression that gave nothing away. "You should teach your wife some manners." Han Tae-sung looked at her for exactly 2 seconds, then looked away. Back to his conversation. Like she hadn't spoken at all. Her face went cold. Lena picked her glass back up, turned back to the group she had been standing with, like nothing had happened, and that should have been the end of it. It wasn't. What happened next was worse, and no one in that room saw it coming. If you're still here, you already know. This story doesn't end quietly. Lena Vuyo was 27 years old and she had built everything herself. Born in Johannesburg, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs and never once complained about either of them. Her mother used to come home at 11 at night with her feet hurting and her back aching, and she would still ask Lena how her day was before she sat down. Lena had watched that her whole childhood and made herself a promise. She would work smart so she would never have to work that broken. She moved cities at 24 with a graphic design degree, a laptop and enough savings to last 4 months if she was careful. She stretched it to 8 by being very careful. Then the clients started coming. Small ones first, a restaurant that needed a logo, a clothing brand that needed a lookbook. Then bigger ones. 3 years later she had a studio, small but real and entirely hers. 2 junior designers who came in every morning trusting her with their livelihoods and a growing client list that she had built contact by contact, project by project, late night by late night. She had never taken a shortcut. She had never needed to. Then 3 months ago her biggest client called on a Tuesday afternoon and told her they were pulling out. No explanation beyond restructuring. No notice period. The payment she had been counting on to cover the next quarter, the payment her whole budget was built around, simply ceased to exist. She sat at her desk after the call and did the numbers 3 times hoping they would change. They didn't. Salaries were due in 2 weeks. Rent was due at the end of the month. She had never missed either, and she was not about to start looking her 2 designers in the face and telling them she couldn't pay them. She spent 3 days trying to find another solution. Called contacts. Chased invoices. Looked at every option available to her. Nothing came together fast enough. Then a friend called. There was a man, she said. He needed a stand-in wife for 3 months. Public appearances, family events, nothing more. He would pay well, very well. She would sign a contract, fulfill the terms, walk away clean. The number her friend quoted made Lena go completely still on the phone. How legitimate is this? She asked. Very. He's serious money. It's a real contract, a real arrangement. Nothing dangerous. She asked for 24 hours to think about it. She decided in 4. She met Han Tae-sung in a private room 2 days later. The room was clean and quiet and expensive in that understated way that spoke of people who didn't need to announce what they had. He was already seated when she walked in. He stood when she entered, not performatively, just as a matter of course, and she noticed that. He was not what she had expected. She had prepared herself for someone louder, someone who wore his wealth more visibly, someone who would make the whole meeting feel like an interview where he held all the cards. Instead she got a man in a dark suit and an expression that had clearly decided it wasn't going to tell her anything she hadn't earned. His eyes were steady and assessing, and they didn't look away from her face when she sat down. He asked her 3 questions. The first was about her work. The second was about how she handled pressure. The third was simple: why did she need the money? She answered all 3 without flinching and without dressing anything up. She told him about the client pulling out. She told him about the salaries and the rent. She told him she wasn't looking for charity. She was looking for a transaction that worked for both of them. Something moved briefly behind his eyes. He slid a contract across the table. She read it carefully. 5 rules: act like his wife in every public setting. Tell no one about the arrangement. Do not cross personal boundaries inside the residence they would share. Do not develop feelings. Walk away clean when the 3 months were up. She read 4 of them very carefully. She signed it. What the contract didn't explain, what there was no reason for her to know sitting in that room, was the full weight of why he needed it. His grandfather was dying. The old man had built the family's name across decades, and he had one final requirement written into his will: the full inheritance. The construction empire his father had grown from a single contract and a borrowed office into something formidable would transfer to Taesung only when he was married. Not engaged. Married. The old man was traditional in the deep, immovable way of his generation, and he was running out of time. Taesung had no interest in marrying anyone. He had every interest in protecting what 3 generations of his family had built. The construction company was the face of it: glass towers, city contracts, board meetings, and handshakes. His other world had no face. It lived in coded communications and late-night operations and a network of men who were paid well enough never to ask questions. He had built that side himself quietly over years, and it worked precisely because he was not reckless with it and not loud about it. He found Lena because he needed someone who could walk into any room and hold it without being coached. Watching her across that table answering his questions without performance or apology, he decided she could. She moved in 2 days after signing. He had sent a car. When it pulled up to the house, she made herself breathe normally before she got out. Inside, she kept her expression professional and her eyes steady and her voice even while he walked her through the space. Her room. The shared areas. Where she could and could not go. He was not rude about the boundaries. He was precise. There was a difference she noted and filed away. That first night she sat on a bed that was larger than her entire apartment and called her mother. Her mother asked how she was settling into the new place. Lena said fine, the room was comfortable, the area was quiet. Her mother said she sounded tired and told her to rest. Lena said she would. She hung up and sat in the quiet of that enormous room for a while before she turned the light off. The days that followed had a careful formality to them. 2 people moving around each other with deliberate precision, keeping to the terms of what had been agreed. But small things had a way of slipping through formality without asking permission. She cooked on the 4th evening because she needed something to do with her hands, and she had always cooked when she was restless. He came home while she was still in the kitchen and stopped at the doorway for a moment. He didn't say anything. He sat down when she put the food on the table and ate without commenting. Then, when he was almost done, without looking up from his plate, he said, "It was good." She looked at him. "Thank you." He nodded. That was the whole exchange. But something about it settled slightly in her chest. He worked late. She was always still up when he came home. Not waiting for him, she told herself, just working. Her laptop open. Her design spread around her on the dining table. He would come in and pour himself a drink, and sometimes, without saying anything, he would sit at the other end of the table. They would both work. The silence between them had a texture that wasn't uncomfortable. It was just 2 people in the same space doing their own things, which was something she hadn't had with anyone in a long time. One evening she asked him about the construction company. She expected the corporate version, figures and projects, and the language of business presentations. Instead, he talked about the specific problem they were solving on a site in the north of the city, the particular challenge of the soil conditions, the way the team had worked around it. He talked about it like someone who actually cared about the details and not just the outcome. She listened. Then she told him about a branding project she was working on for a client, the difficulty of capturing something intangible in a visual language. He asked questions that showed he had understood what she'd said. She found herself talking longer than she had planned. Neither of them mentioned the contract. The first family dinner was a week into the arrangement. His parents, 2 aunts, his younger sister Jiyeon, who looked at Lena with open curiosity, and the uncomplicated warmth of someone who had not yet decided to have an opinion. His grandfather sat at the head of the table, frail now, the weight of age on him visibly, but his eyes sharp and present and missing absolutely nothing. Taesung introduced her to the family with his hand at the small of her back and his voice carrying a warmth she hadn't heard from him in the house. She matched his energy without effort. She was good at reading what a room needed, and this room needed her to be warm, present and comfortable. She answered his mother's questions directly, and with genuine engagement. She made Jiyeon laugh twice. She thanked his father for having her with a sincerity that wasn't performed. She felt the grandfather watching her all evening. Not suspiciously. More like a man confirming something he had already decided. As they were leaving, the old man held Taesung's arm at the door. His voice was low enough that only his grandson could hear. "Don't lose that one." Taesung said nothing. He helped Lena with her coat and they walked to the car. "You did well tonight," he said when they were on the road. "I know," she said. He looked at her briefly. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite name, something that hadn't been there before. Then he looked back at the road and neither of them said anything else the rest of the way home. Across the city that same evening, Omire was processing news that had arrived through 3 separate people in the space of one afternoon. Taesung had a wife. She and Taesung had been together for 2 years. She had been the one to end it. Or she had told herself that story often enough that she had started to believe it. The truth, the version she didn't look at directly very often, was that she had ended it because staying had become too painful and leaving had felt like the only form of control she had left. She had told herself the coldness of him wasn't worth it, that she deserved someone who let her in. She had rebuilt her life around that story. Then she heard about the wife and every careful thing she had built around herself came apart quietly in her chest without making a sound. She didn't react immediately. She was too smart for that. She started showing up at events she knew he would attend. Always with a reason to be there. Always dressed like she hadn't thought too hard about it. Watching. Waiting to see this woman. Constructing her understanding of what she was dealing with before she did anything about it. The first time she saw Lena in person, the thing she felt was not what she had prepared for. She had expected to feel superior. Instead, she felt something that looked uncomfortably like recognition. This woman carried herself like someone who had decided a long time ago that she was not going to make herself small for any room she walked into. She wore her confidence the way she wore her clothes, like it had always belonged to her. Mireille didn't like that. So at that business gathering she positioned herself, chose her moment, walked over to the group Lena was standing with and inserted herself into the conversation pleasantly. The group was exactly the kind of audience she needed, women who had been in this world long enough to know everything about everyone and to talk about all of it. She made easy conversation for 2 full minutes. Then she turned to Lena and let her eyes move over her slowly, unhurried, head to toe, the look of someone who has already made their verdict. "I have to say, you're not quite what I pictured when I heard he had a wife." She tilted her head. "I expected someone more suited to all of this. But I suppose different men want different things." The group went still. Lena looked at her steadily. "I'm sorry, were you speaking to me?" "I was speaking about you." "There's a difference." "There isn't. Not from where I'm standing." "One step closer." "Not aggressive." "The step of a woman who has made a decision and is not interested in discussing it." "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you think you know about me or where I came from. But I will tell you this once, whatever you just said, don't say anything like it again. Not here. Not anywhere near me." Mireille's smile cracked at the edges. She turned and looked across the room at Taesung, who had been watching everything without having moved a single muscle. "You should teach your wife some manners." Taesung looked at her for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looked away. Back to the conversation he had been having before she walked in. Like she hadn't said a word. Her face went cold. Lena picked up her glass and turned back to the group. Like nothing had happened. In the car on the way home, neither of them spoke for a long time. The city moved past the windows in blurred lights and Lena looked at all of it without really seeing it. "You didn't have to do that," Taesung said. "I know. It could have complicated things." "It didn't." Another silence. Then, "Who is she?" "Someone I used to know." Lena nodded. She looked out the window. She didn't ask anything else and he didn't offer anything else. But something had shifted between them in that car, and both of them could feel it sitting in the space between their seats the whole way home. 3 weeks later, Mireille found out about the contract. A contact who moved in the right circles had found the right thread and pulled it. She didn't get all of it. She got enough. She sat with it for 2 full days, turned it over, examined it, looked at what it meant and what she could do with it. Then she chose her moment carefully. A larger event. More important people. The kind of room where information traveled fast and didn't come back. She arrived dressed like a woman who had been thinking about this for days and had decided that every detail mattered. She moved through the room for the first hour doing nothing but being present and pleasant and seen. Then she spotted her opportunity. Lena was standing with a group of women, the wives and partners of men like Tae-sung, women who had been in this world long enough to have seen everything and to have opinions about all of it. Mireille walked over with her wine glass and her warmest smile and folded herself into the conversation so naturally that no one would have thought twice about it. 3 minutes of pleasant exchange. Easy laughter. Then she turned to the group with an expression like she was about to share something delightfully surprising. You know what I genuinely admire? She paused just long enough. What this one does. She gestured toward Lena with her glass. Taking money to stand in as someone's wife. Showing up to every event. Meeting the whole family, playing the role perfectly. Month after month. She shook her head with something that looked like admiration but wasn't. I couldn't do it. I don't think most people could. Every woman in that group went completely still. Lena went still. Mireille turned to look directly at her. Her voice went almost gentle. How many weeks do you have left on the contract? The silence lasted 4 full seconds. Then, one of the women in the group set her glass down a little too hard. That's enough, she said sharply, looking at Mireille. Whatever point you're trying to make, this isn't the way to do it. Another voice, quieter but firm. You're embarrassing yourself. The tension in the circle shifted, subtle but undeniable. You know what's interesting, Lena said. Her voice was quiet and absolutely level. You've done this twice now. In public. In front of people. The first time I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I thought maybe you didn't know better. She paused. Now I see that you do know better. You just don't care. Mireille's expression held. I want you to look around this room in about 10 minutes, Lena continued. Look at who people are talking about. And ask yourself if this went the way you planned. She looked at her steadily for one more moment. Because from where I'm standing it didn't. She set her glass down on the nearest surface, turned and walked across the room, head perfectly level, back straight. Not hurrying. She found Tae-sung and put her hand on his arm and leaned close enough that only he could hear. We need to leave right now. And you need to know what just happened. In the car she told him everything. Every word Mireille had said. Every face that had turned. She told it the way she told everything, directly without performance. But her hands were pressed flat against her thighs and her jaw was tight and he could see what it was costing her to hold herself this steady. He listened without interrupting. When she finished the car was silent for a long time. I'm sorry, he said. She turned and looked at him. It was the last thing she had expected. Not the words themselves but the way he said them, like he meant them completely, like they weren't sufficient and he knew that. That should not have happened. Either time. None of it. She turned back to the window. She pressed her lips together. She was holding herself together with both hands and he could see it clearly, and he said nothing else because he understood that she didn't need words right now. She needed the space to hold herself. Lena. She didn't answer. Look at me. She turned. He held her eyes. I will handle it. The next morning he went to see Mireille without calling ahead. She opened the door and something moved across her face when she saw him, surprise, then something carefully composed over it. He stepped inside. He did not sit down. He did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. He told her plainly, if she came near Lena again at any event in any space in any capacity, there would be consequences she was not in a position to manage. Mireille looked at him for a long time. He could see her processing it. Then, you have feelings for her. He said nothing. She signed a contract, Tae-sung. 3 months. When it expires she is going to walk away and collect what she's owed and go back to her life. And you are going to be standing there having burned everything for a woman who was always just passing through. We're done here, he said. He turned toward the door. She doesn't belong in your world. Mireille's voice followed him. And somewhere inside you know that. He opened the door and left without looking back. She stood in her apartment alone with her wine glass and her plans and the particular fury of a woman who understands that she is losing and cannot find a way to stop it. The last week of the 3 months came without warning. Neither of them said anything about it. They moved through the house that week like the number wasn't sitting in the air above every meal, every late night at the dining table, every moment of that familiar shared silence. She started packing slowly, Not all at once, just small things, folding them back into the bag she had arrived with. One evening he came and stood in the doorway of her room and watched her for a long moment. She was facing away from him and didn't know he was there. He watched her fold a blouse carefully and place it in the bag, and something moved through him that he didn't have a word for and didn't try to name. He turned and walked away without saying anything. The inheritance was secured. The grandfather had seen what he needed to see. There was no clause left in any contract that gave her a reason to stay. On the last morning she brought her bag to the entrance hall and he was already there, standing by the door with his hands in his pockets, like he had been there for a while. She had not expected to find him there. She stood her bag upright and held out her hand. "It was good working with you." He looked at her hand, then at her face. He did not take it. "Don't go. Tae-sung. The contract is finished." "I know that. That's not what I'm talking about." She held his gaze for a second longer than she meant to. "You're asking me to stay in a world you've never fully shown me," she said quietly. "A world where problems disappear overnight, and people don't ask questions about how." He didn't answer. Her voice didn't change. "If I stay, I don't pretend not to see that. And I don't become someone who depends on it." A pause. "Whatever this is," she gestured lightly between them, "it doesn't get to cost me who I am. I know all of that. This is not a simple thing." "No," he said. "It isn't simple. I know that too." She looked at him. At this man who had said more to her in this hallway in 2 minutes than he had volunteered in 3 months. At this man who had stood in 2 different rooms and watched someone come at her, and had not once told her to manage herself or keep the peace. At this man who had told her, "I will handle it," and meant it. She set her bag down. When Mireille found out Lena had stayed, she made a decision and stopped being careful about anything. She spent 2 days identifying Lena's most important clients, the ones the studio couldn't afford to lose. Then she reached out to them. Quietly. Professionally. She told each one the same thing, that Lena's studio was under investigation for financial irregularities, that the contract she had been issuing might not hold up to scrutiny, that it would be wise to pause the relationship until things were clearer. She was calm about it. Methodical. She chose her words carefully, and she did not leave anything traceable back to herself that an ordinary person would find. 3 clients called Lena the same day. She took the first call at her desk. She took the second call standing up. By the time the third one came, she was already sitting very still with her hand flat on the desk. Her 2 junior designers were moving around on the other side of her office door talking about a project, their voices easy and normal, not knowing that the floor had just shifted under everything. She thought about her mother. She thought about 2 jobs and feet that hurt and 11 o'clock at night. She thought about 4 months of savings stretched to 8. She thought about 3 years of contact by contact, project by project, late night by late night. She thought about what it had cost and what it meant. Then she picked up her phone and called Tae-sung. He answered immediately. She told him everything. When she finished, he said, "I've got it." For seconds after he ended the call, his other world activated completely and silently. Every communication Mireille had sent was traced. Every contact she had reached identified. Every carefully worded lie she had delivered was corrected. Quietly, thoroughly, completely. Every client received a call from someone credible who set the record straight without drama, and without leaving questions. Then he kept going. Mireille's fashion import company had been operating in spaces that had never been carefully examined. He made certain they were now examined very carefully by exactly the right people. He did it with the same precision and quiet he applied to everything that mattered to him. Her company was gone within 2 weeks. She came to find him. She was not the woman with the wine glass this time. She was not composed or calculated or dressed for an occasion. She was something rawer than all of that. "You destroyed my business. You attacked my wife," he said. The word sat between them in the room. "She is not your wife." "She will be," he said. Mireille let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "You didn't choose her because she's easy," she said. "You chose her because she won't bend." Her eyes held his. "Men like you don't fall in love with women like that. You go to war with them." A small pause. "Just make sure you know the difference before it costs you more than I did." Mireille stared at him. The full weight of what that meant settled over her face slowly. Not just what he had said, but what was behind it, the completeness of it, the finality. She stood there with it for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out, and this time there was nothing left to reach for, and she knew it. He told Lena that evening. All of it. She sat across from him and listened without interrupting, and when he finished she was quiet for a moment. You didn't have to do all of that. I know. I was handling it. I know that too. She looked at him steadily. You called me your wife. I did. I didn't sign a contract for that. I know, he said. This time I'm asking. He proposed the way he did everything, without performance or excess or anything borrowed from what proposals were supposed to look like. Just him and her and the quiet truth of what had become everything without either of them sitting down one day and deciding it would. She said yes the way she did everything. Without drama. Without hesitation. Like a woman who had made her decision and was not in the habit of going back on it. The wedding was small and close. Her mother flew in from Johannesburg and cried from the moment she came through arrivals and didn't fully stop until the ceremony was over, and even then her eyes were doing something. His grandfather sat in the front row, frail now, the weight of his years on him fully, but his eyes sharp and present and not missing a single moment of it. He watched his grandson stand at the end of that aisle and watch Lena walk toward him. He watched the expression on his grandson's face, open in a way he had waited a very long time to see it. He leaned to the person beside him. Good, he said quietly. He needed someone like that. He was not wrong. If you made it to the end, you already know this wasn't just a story about a contract. It was about knowing your worth and refusing to shrink, no matter who's watching. Like the video and tell me in the comments, would you have stayed or would you have walked away? And if you want more stories like this, the kind that don't end the way you expect, subscribe and stay with me. Thank you for watching.